Welcome to The People's Mic. I am Dr. Violet Jimenez Sims. I'm the proud vice president of the NAACP New Britain branch, and I welcome you to this segment today where I have some fabulous guests, and we'll be talking about mental health, healing our communities, mental health and access, especially in communities of color. So I will let my guests introduce themselves today.
Fantastic.
Starting to my right.
Hi, my name is Renice Washington. I serve as my school district's employee relations specialist, but outside of that, I am a mental health advocate as well as a clinician.
Hi, my name is Mylene Smith. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, founder of Phoenix Mental Health Solutions and executive director, also co-founder of Arts for Healing, a nonprofit program for children.
Hi, I'm Idalia Crespo, licensed professional counselor, founder of the Healing Project, and also school counselor and assistant to the principal at a high school.
All right, fantastic. I cannot wait to get started in this conversation with all of you. So, we're going to talk about access, community care, and really culturally responsive healing. And if you know me, you know I do not operate from a deficit lens. So I understand there's stigma in our communities that is very commonly talked about, but I want to move beyond that. And I think that you will all do that beautifully, I'm sure, with your expertise and everything that you bring. So for our first question, let's talk about that, right? We often hear about the stigma in communities of color around mental health, but how does that show up today? We do want to acknowledge what's real, right? But what are the nuances that we miss if we stop there?
So I can speak for the Latino community, right? So the stigma begins, for example, at home sometimes. Seeking mental health is seen as a sign of weakness. You're not resilient enough. You're not like your mom, or you're not like your uncle, or you're not like all of these people within the family that were so strong. And my question is like, how did that work out, right, for you? But sometimes that's through the lens of a family. Sometimes it is seen as a sign of weakness. Also, if we connect that to faith, right? Looking for mental health help sometimes looks like you don't have enough faith. You need to pray more. You need to perhaps fast a little more. What did you do? Maybe you're sinning. So here comes the guilt component of it sometimes. And I don't want to just make a blanket statement about that, but typically that prevents our, faith-based community to sometimes to look for the mental health help that they need.
Stigma is historical. It's generational. The thing with stigma in the Black community, I'll speak to that, is that, like Idalia said, we were told to pray it away, keep it in the family. We don't share our business for so many reasons. Number one, hospitals, people would go to hospitals or go to get medical help, and people of color found mistreatment. Research, people of color were exploited. So there is a big part of trust there. Like, we don't trust people who say they're going to help us. Then when it comes to therapy, it is really tough to find therapists of color and people who understand and who are culturally competent. And what happens is people who are looking for therapy, they feel like they're explaining their culture. And that is really, really difficult. And then you lose that kind of motivation to go and get help. And then again, like you said, going to therapy historically was a sign of weakness. And so, like, you should be able to, like, pull it together, pull yourself up. We can get through this. And sometimes that's just not enough.
Doesn't work sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on a little, although honestly, y'all summed it up really amazingly. I imagine some of us have even had clients where they show up like, I'm not crazy, or like, I just have this going on. It's like, first of all, no one watch it, okay? Because you're talking about my client. So you watch how you talk about yourself in here. But the concern that if I am having mental health challenges, that there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I think mental health challenges, it's very easy, in particular for communities of color, to then feel othered, another level of feeling othered. White supremacy inherently already others us, unrealistic and unpractical standards, and ones that really don't align sometimes with the value that people of color have, depending on what their culture is. And so when you're then talking about taking care of yourself because you might be stressed or something that people feel is fairly normal, and to be fair, a certain level of stress is normal. A certain level, you having depressive symptoms does not necessarily always mean you're depressed. Like, so it's
right.
nuanced.
Absolutely.
And so when we talk about how that stigma shows up today, I think the ignorance of us knowing ourselves, because we were really encouraged not to. But secondly, when we talk about what do we miss, I think the lack of education to kind of battle some of the misinformation through white supremacy, through colloquial things that have happened, through history. I think those are the things that sometimes causing a bit more of a challenge with people with mental health than if they didn't have those other generational or historical contexts or dynamics added to it.
And also something that I forgot to mention that is obviously part of the Hispanic or Latino culture, but I'm pretty sure we can all of us speak to that. Men, for example, machismo.
Yeah.
You cannot be weak. You cannot shed tears. You cannot be vulnerable. So speaking to that, a lot of men do not seek the help they need because then again, it's linked to a sign of weakness or lack of faith in our communities.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Wow. Yes.
Point.
Excellent points. It sounds like obviously a lot of overlap between communities of color, whether it's the Black community, the Latino community, the nuances of what causes some of the hesitancy, right? Also has overlap and is there. Faith, family practice, how you feel about airing your dirty laundry or not. Historical context, having a reasonable distrust of systems based on history, and all of those things that are absolutely there. So thank you for sort of your vulnerability in sharing some both personal and community connections to that. And so, especially, and Mylene, you brought this up, right? That then if you go to seek help, now there's an added layer, right? Of not necessarily having the people that support you already know you enough about you. And now that's a barrier. I wanted to come and already had to cross all these barriers to feel good enough or have the confidence to come to you and ask for this help. And now you're either misunderstanding things about my culture or having me explain things about myself that should seem normal before I can even get into the real stuff, right?
Right.
And so when, with that in mind, let's keep talking a little bit more about what those barriers are, structural, cultural, or financial, or whatever other ways you all are exposed to that still make mental health support inaccessible to so many.
I can definitely say money. Back a while ago, therapy was looked at as a luxury, and prior to that, it was looked at as like you don't go because that means that there's something really wrong with you, or that if you had disorganized thoughts, like you belong in an asylum versus anxiety or something like that. But there is this fine line. If you don't make enough money, right, you can get something like Medicaid, right, and that is covered. But if you make a little bit more, you go into an access healthcare or something like that, right? Then you have these copays, and copays could be anywhere from $5, maybe sometimes none, but it could be all the way up to $40. I have, or higher. I have clients who have high copays or high deductibles. And so that's then when therapy becomes a luxury. Like I cannot afford to do this. And the climate we're in today, now you're juggling like, okay, I don't have enough food. And do I go to therapy when I need to pay for food or this bill or gas? The other thing is telehealth is great. Telehealth is great. It really helped with the issue with transportation, but there's still a bill. There's still a copay or something like that. And then the other thing, like you touched on, 80%, let me just switch the numbers. 20% of therapists are people of color. Now, I would love to know, I should have did some research on this, is what percentage are men? Since Idalia touched on men.
Yes. Less.
And so that's some other barriers there. I'm sure I can keep going, but I would love to hear some of the barriers you have.
So I think structurally speaking, right, sometimes we don't have centers that have all the type of help our clients would need. It's not just mental health, it's physical health, because they're both so intertwined. So sometimes transportation, like where do they live? Do they have transportation to get to therapy? Or even the technology to be able to do telehealth. So yeah, our population lacks a lot of the ability to be able to connect.
Absolutely. And I'll go ahead and hit on the cultural aspect, because I think that's what we've been talking about the whole time, the lack sometimes of a relatable or someone from your culture when you're seeking mental health support. You know, I pride myself with, sometimes I sound like someone's auntie, depending on what age the client is. Sometimes I sound like your cousin who you just needed to hear the truth from. Okay, like, girl, now you shouldn't have did that. Let's talk about it. How'd you feel? And what I often hear in particular from my Black women, although really all women of color clients that I have, is this fear of being judged, in particular by white women, because of some of the social history that is, that is involved between white women in particular and women of color. While we're both women, our journey through society tends to look different, and thus our mental health journey. I've got Black women who won't cry, who are scared to cry. They don't want to be that vulnerable. They don't feel psychologically safe enough, even with themselves, to even allow a tear. Now, they got the right one, because I'm going to make you cry.
Oh, absolutely. Me too.
I'm going to ask the question, how'd you feel when that happened? Yeah. But that cultural aspect, I mean, and I see a few men, and even in that, the machismo stuff for some of my Latino men, and same for my Black men, and even for my white men, of like, how do you bring men's humanity to their forefront so that you are not so disconnected, or believe there's a benefit from being so disconnected from your emotionality? Like, you're a man and a human, and so that means that you are allowed to have fear.
Feel.
That's right.
Yeah, and so culturally, that's been really, I find a lot of clients who, until they got to us, they weren't going to do it because they found someone who understood them.
And just to like piggyback off what you said, the cultural piece is so incredibly important.
Yes, absolutely.
For example, when people of color come into me after experiencing a white counselor, I will hear things like, I don't want to be told that my story should be a book or a movie. And I'm like, excuse me? Like what? And I'm like actually shocked, but I'm at the point where I've heard this so many times. They're like, you're so incredible. I can't believe you made it through that. Where people of color, like historically, we know what people of color and Hispanics have gone through. And we're like, I hear you.
Yeah.
Now I'm here to listen. How can I help you? And that makes the difference.
Absolutely. And in my case, right, I do offer bilingual services. So I do have my sessions. I specialize in Latina women. I have my sessions in both English and Spanish, and the connection there is amazing. And they're like, oh my God, I feel I'm speaking to either my grandmother or somebody in the family. And they also say, oh my God, this is therapy? And also, yes, and it's because they feel heard. You don't have to spend 5 sessions of their time trying to understand a lot of the cultural aspect of their life. So you go straight to meeting the client where they are and then moving forward in helping them access the mental health services that they need. So it does make a difference to serve your community. And I proudly do that, and I will continue to do so.
So much. I'm over here, encouraged, entertained, a little bit of all of it. I really appreciate, again, all the intersectionality, right? Like the patriarchy affects everybody. It doesn't even matter your race, right? And then there are other layers of other aspects of our identity that come into play here. So, I mean, my work in education now focuses on diversifying the profession, right? Because similarly, to meet the needs of our students, we really need people who understand them and are willing to meet them where they're at. But one of the things that I say is not only does having more educators of color in the classroom help kids of color, but it helps everyone, right? It helps all kids to just have people who are culturally competent, who have, less bias, right, toward anyone who comes and sits in front of them. But the other thing is that it's okay, right? We want white people too, to be teachers, to be therapists, to be all of that, and to do it well for everyone that needs it. So I do a lot of work around, cultural competence for educators, because even if you are a white person, you still need to just have the cultural competence to be a good teacher to all of the kids in front of you. And it just helps to develop that skill. That to me is a bridge regardless, right? While simultaneously diversifying. We also just need everyone to learn some historical context and then therefore not do the thing like, I think I'm paying you a compliment. Oh my gosh, you made it. You should write a book, right? That's not a compliment to sort of trivialize my experiences that way. And it's well-intentioned, but it doesn't land well. And so cultural competence would help someone not do that and still be able to serve that client. And so thinking of all of that, right? How can we strengthen culturally responsive mental health services that truly meet people where they are in the system as it exists, right?
There's so much, right, that we can speak about in regards to that. But at least for me, is you're not going to have, if we go to the percentages that you explained earlier, all our Latino or Black community are not going to have a therapist that looks like them, let's be honest, right? Because their need is so much and it is only a few of us. But whoever's practicing, right, go in the field with cultural humility. You're not going to sit there and think you understand just because you've seen a movie, just because you've read a book, or just because you have a neighbor of color. You need to actually sit with each client, listen to their story, and be humble about that. Let them talk about what they're going through without being trivial about their suffering. That's a key word for me, right? Or phrase, cultural humility, so that you're able to really service your clients the way you're supposed to or the way they deserve.
Agreed. Interesting that you said cultural humility. I was also going to go in that direction, which for me is that humility part, right? Like I often worry and I'm curious about those of us when we get our degrees and certificates and we get into certain places. It then becomes, I know what these people need. I've got the things, I know what they need. And when we're talking about being culturally responsive, for me, it's a constant alignment in being culturally humility. What'd you say again?
Cultural humility.
Cultural humility, But in that same vein, I think at least the willingness to be reflective about your practices, regardless of how
Yes.
long you have been doing it. So what, you studied with so and so. It's 2025 now. The issues here are a smidgen different than 10 years ago. Not that different, but the country looks the politics and everything are a little bit more explicit. So how are you reflecting on what you know already and identifying the gap between what you already know and where you need to be to meet your clients?
Right.
Absolutely. And I try to do that a lot, like really looking into my own biases, because we're only human and we only sometimes know so much. Doesn't matter how prepared you are, but each new client that I get and that's sitting in front of me, and I'm a person of faith too, I'm like, let me hear them with the heart. Let me give them the space that they need, regardless of what I know, even if they're my Latina women, because their stories are different. Their needs are so diverse. But really reflecting in your own biases is key.
Yeah.
To be able to do better, because we don't know it all.
And to piggyback off what you just said about religion, I'll just say church. It's okay to be a Christian and go to counseling.
Absolutely.
And going back to that stigma, when we hear, oh, just pray, we're also supposed to be mentally well. It says that in the Bible.
Absolutely.
And we help people with mental wellness. So if you go to church and you say you're a Bible believer or a Christian, you can still get therapy. You need to take care of yourself.
And I think faith-based organizations, they have so much power, and I don't think they understand that. But how can they do better, or all of us collectively can do better, is actually listening to, if we use church, as you said, their members and their needs. They can have all the faith in the world and they can do all the praying, and I believe in that myself. But you cannot not educate your congregation, because their wellness that comes with receiving the services that you need, and wisdom is key, particularly for faith-based leaders. You need to be able, you need to sort of give them the green light, for lack of a better word, right? That it is okay to get help.
Yes.
And that's where our leaders come in. These
Yes.
leaderships, organizations. I'm part of a sorority, but doing these mental health wellness fairs, the
Workshops.
the bishops, the preachers are saying, look, mental health care is good care. So you can take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have just a couple more minutes, and so I will ask you to just say some final thoughts around either normalizing mental health conversations. You already all talked quite a bit around faith-based organizations, other community organizations, but normalizing those conversations, and or noting what gives you hope. What gives you hope about the direction we're headed in terms of mental health awareness and access, especially in Black and Brown communities?
This panel gives me hope.
Yeah.
Seeing these women of color talk about mental health. What we just talked about, the faith-based organizations out in our community. But one thing I do want to say that's extremely important is therapy. We have to be mindful of the people we're giving therapy to. So children, we have a art program and music program, and children don't do well sitting on a couch answering questions and talking about their feelings. So Arts for Healing provides a completely different atmosphere where kids can express themselves through art and music. So we also need to look at things differently and how to serve our community.
And just a quick phrase for me is, it might sound a little cliche, right? But mental health is wealth. Right? Having good mental health is wealth. Let's take care of that. Let's not ignore that. And to all the leaders and admins and people who are in high positions of influence, let's encourage that when it's needed.
I'll be honest, I agree. This gives me hope. Also, when you're on a session with the client and they say, oh, I never thought about it like that. Or like, that's really going to be impactful. Things like that give me hope. And so I often say, when you die and when we all die on our tombstone, they're not going to say so-and-so never missed any days of work. So-and-so never messed up any emails. She did that real good. She always had Grammarly on. You know, we want to be thoughtful about when we talk about our lives and our legacy, who do we want to be and what are the things that we want to do with our life? Yeah.
Wow. Powerful, powerful way to end. Thank you all so much for joining us again. Dr. Violet Jimenez Sims from the New Britain NAACP branch. And if you heard all these fantastic conversations, I hope you are empowered, if you haven't thought about this before, to get your checkup from the neck up. All right. So join us on the next one. Thanks for being here.
Take care.
Thank you.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!